Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be looking at something a little bit different. We're going to be looking at bulk book sales. So, kind of moving away from that image of someone browsing in a bookstore, and picking up a single copy. We're talking about selling a whole bunch of books at once. And this is something that I think can be really valuable, whether you are an author looking for some new revenue streams, or maybe you're just someone who's interested in the book business in general and kind of wants to see how things work a little differently. We've got a great piece here from the chief editor over at Mothwalla Media Publications, and they're really kind of giving us a guide to selling books directly to organizations.
It's interesting when you think about bulk sales because it really is a completely different way of looking at things. You're not focused on the individual reader anymore. You're thinking about what an organization needs and what their motivations might be for buying a book.
So let's break that down a little bit. When
Yeah.
we say bulk book sales, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, it's pretty simple at its core. It's when an organization buys a large quantity of a book all at once. And that could be, dozens of copies, it could be hundreds, it could even be thousands, depending on the size of the organization and what they want to do with the books.
Yeah, that's a lot of books. So what makes an organization want to buy so many copies at once? They're not all just going straight to the office bookshelf, are they?
No, not usually. Usually they're buying the books for a specific reason, like maybe for employee gifts, especially around the holidays or, for some kind of special occasion. Or maybe they're doing some kind of company-wide training program and they want every employee to have a copy of a book on, say, leadership or communication skills or something like that.
So it's all about finding a need that the organization has that your book can fill. It's not just about reaching one reader at a time. You're reaching a whole group of people all at once. But what's the advantage for the author besides, making a larger sale?
Well, there are a lot of advantages, actually. Think about it. If your book is being used as a resource for a university course or it's given to every new employee at a big company, that's incredible exposure for you as an author. And that kind of exposure can lead to all sorts of opportunities down the road.
That makes sense. It's not just about the money from the sale. It's about getting your name and your book out there. But when we talk about bulk buyers, who are we actually talking about? Is it just big corporations?
No, it's a much wider range of organizations than you might think. You've got businesses, of course, but you've also got educational institutions. Universities might use your book as a textbook, or a high school might incorporate it into their curriculum.
I mean, to think that my book could be required reading for a college course,
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing.
Right. And then you've got nonprofits who are looking for books that align with their mission, and foundations that want to give books to the people they support. Even government agencies sometimes need books for training programs or outreach efforts. The Mothwalla Guide even mentions an author who landed a deal with the Cheese of the Month Club. So you never really know what kind of organization might be interested in your book.
It's kind of blowing my mind a little bit to think about all the different possibilities.
Yeah.
But, okay, let's say, hypothetically, I've written a book about beekeeping.
Yeah.
What kind of organization would even want to buy that in bulk?
That's a great question. And it actually leads perfectly into the next step, which is crafting your pitch. It's not about sending out the same generic message to every organization you can think of. It's about really thinking about who would benefit from reading your book and tailoring your message specifically to them.
So less spray and pray and more like really being strategic about it. What's your take on that? Have you ever been in that position where you're trying to figure out, who's the right audience for your work? Let us know down in the comments.
Absolutely. It's all about finding the right fit. So in your beekeeping example, you might reach out to agricultural schools or environmental organizations, honey producers, even hobbyist groups. You just have to think outside the box a little bit.
So how do I approach these organizations? I can't just show up at their office with a box of books and hope for the best, can I?
No, probably not. The key is to remember that you're not just selling a product, you're offering a solution. Your pitch needs to clearly show how your book can help the organization achieve their goals.
So instead of saying, hey, buy my book, I should be saying, here's how my book can help you do X, Y, and Z.
Exactly. And the Mothwalla Guide actually lays out some really key elements to creating a successful pitch. First, you need to highlight the value that your book offers. Does it offer practical advice? Does it help people improve their skills? Does it align with the organization's mission? You need to make that connection crystal clear.
It's all about the what's in it for me factor. Except in this case, the me is an organization. So what else should I be highlighting in my pitch?
Well, you also want to keep in mind that we're talking about bulk orders here. Organizations are much more likely to consider buying a large quantity of books if they feel like they're getting a good deal. So offering volume discounts is really important.
That makes sense. The more they buy, the lower the price per book. But how do I figure out what those discounts should be? Is there some kind of magic formula for pricing bulk orders?
There's no one-size-fits-all formula, unfortunately. But a common approach is to offer tiered discounts. So, for example, you might offer a 10% discount for orders of 2050 books, 15% for 5100 books, and so on. The key is to find a balance where you're making a profit, but you're also offering an attractive deal. And the Mothlala Guide actually gives some really helpful real-world pricing examples that you can use as a starting point.
It's all about finding that sweet spot, right? Where you're making money, but also making it worth their while to buy in bulk. Does this mean that I'm going to have to be ready for some tough negotiations?
Yeah, negotiation is definitely going to be part of the process. And that's why it's so important to know your bottom line. Know what the absolute lowest price is that you're willing to accept, and don't be afraid to walk away from a deal if it's not working out for you.
It's a good reminder for all of us, really, not just authors. Know your worth. But let's be honest, sometimes it's not just about the numbers. So how do I actually go about building relationships with these bulk buyers and actually closing the deal?
Well, that's where personalization and responsiveness come in. It's really important to remember that you're dealing with real people who have their own needs and priorities. So ditch those generic templates and really try to connect with them on a human level.
So no more sending out mass emails. I should be taking the time to craft individual messages that are specific to the organization I'm reaching out to. What are your thoughts on that? How important is that personal touch in your experience? Share your stories in the comments below.
It really does make a difference when you take the time to personalize your outreach. The Mothlala Guide actually really emphasizes that point. They talk about treating organizations more like partners and less like just customers. Be responsive to their questions, tailor your communication to their needs. Even offering a few free copies for them to evaluate can go a long way.
So it's about building trust,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Showing that you're genuinely invested in helping them succeed.
Right.
But okay, let's say that initial contact goes well. How do you actually nurture those relationships and keep those conversations going?
Well, staying engaged is really key. Check in regularly, ask for feedback, offer support if they need it. You want to position yourself as a resource for them, not just a salesperson. And the guide also suggests finding ways to offer added value beyond just the book itself. Maybe you host a webinar that's based on the book's content, or create some bonus materials that are specifically tailored for their organization.
Oh, that's a really good idea. Going above and beyond. Now, I'm kind of curious. The guide also mentions that different organizations are going to use books differently. Some might be buying them as gifts, others might be using them for training programs. So how do I actually adjust my approach based on how they plan to use the book?
Right. It's important to be adaptable. You can pitch the same book in different ways depending on what the organization wants to do with it. So if you're talking to a company that's looking for a book to use in a leadership training program, you might want to focus on the practical exercises and discussion prompts that are included. But if you're talking to a company that's thinking about giving the book as a gift to their employees, you might want to talk more about its inspirational message and how it can help people with personal growth.
So it's like having a bunch of different elevator pitches ready to go, each one tailored to a different situation.
Exactly.
Now, let's say I'm a brand new author. Should I even be thinking about bulk sales at this point? Or should I be focusing on individual sales first?
Actually, I think it can be really beneficial to incorporate bulk sales into your strategy right from the start.
Oh, really? Tell me more about that.
Well, for one thing, bulk sales can give you a really nice revenue boost up front, which can be incredibly helpful when you're just starting out and maybe you've got some publishing costs that you need to cover or you want to invest in marketing.
So it's almost like a jump start to your book launch.
Yeah, exactly.
But what about the exposure aspect? Wouldn't it be better to focus on getting individual readers first and then building up to bulk sales?
Well, it's definitely important to build a grassroots following, but bulk sales can really help to amplify that exposure. Think about it. If you can get your book into the hands of hundreds or even thousands of people within a particular organization or industry, that's going to have a huge impact on your visibility and your credibility as an author.
So it's about targeting those pockets of readers
Yeah.
where you know there's a high concentration of potential buyers.
Exactly. The Mothlala Guide actually has a really interesting analogy for this. They compare bulk sales to planting a tree.
A tree. Okay, I'm interested.
They say that just like a tree needs time to grow and mature, so does your book's reach and impact. Bulk sales are like planting those initial seeds that can eventually grow into something much bigger.
I like that. It's a good reminder that it's not just about the immediate sale. It's about creating something that's going to have a lasting impact.
Speaking of impact, I'm really drawn to the idea of using my writing to make a difference in the world. So can bulk sales play a role in that?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the most rewarding things about bulk sales is that potential to make a real difference. Imagine your book being used by a nonprofit to help the people they serve, or being chosen by a company that's really committed to promoting diversity and inclusion.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like your book becomes a tool for creating positive change within these organizations.
Right. And if you can find organizations whose values align with the message of your book, that makes it even more meaningful.
It's like you're multiplying your impact. You're not just reaching individual readers anymore, you're reaching entire communities.
Now, let's be real for a second. Not every author has a ton of time to dedicate to this kind of outreach. It sounds like a lot of work. What advice would you give to authors who are feeling overwhelmed?
Well, I think the most important thing is to have a clear strategy and set realistic goals. You don't have to do everything all at once. Start by identifying a handful of organizations that you think would be a good fit for your book and focus your efforts there.
So it's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for help. There are a lot of people out there who specialize in helping authors navigate the world of bulk sales. So don't feel like you have to do it all alone.
That's a good reminder. It's okay to ask for help.
Hmm.
But let's face it, rejection is part of the game. So how do you handle those setbacks? When you hear no, how do you pick yourself up and keep going?
The Maflala Guide actually talks about this. They say that it's important to remember that rejection is part of the process and that it's not personal, it's just business.
I know it's easier said than done, though. As authors, we put so much of ourselves into our work. So it can be hard not to take it personally when someone says no.
It definitely takes practice. But if you can kind of detach your emotional response from the outcome, it can be really helpful. The guide actually encourages you to look at rejection as a learning opportunity. What can you learn from this experience? How can you refine your pitch or your approach for next time?
Turn that no into a not yet.
Exactly.
But even with that mindset, it can still be tough to stay motivated sometimes. What advice would you give to authors who are feeling discouraged?
I think the first thing is just to acknowledge those feelings. It's
Right.
totally normal to feel discouraged sometimes.
Oh, yeah. I think we all go through that.
And then I would say try to reconnect with your why. Why did you write this book in the first place? What impact do you hope to make?
So remembering that bigger picture. But what about those days when you just don't feel like doing the work? You're tired, you're uninspired, you would literally rather do anything else than send out another pitch email. What do you do then?
I think it's important to give yourself permission to take a break.
Oh, for sure.
We all have days when our motivation is just not there, so step away for a little bit and recharge. And when you're ready to come back to it, try setting some small, achievable goals. Instead of focusing on pitching to hundreds of organizations, break it down into smaller tasks. Maybe you just focus on sending 5 emails today.
Breaking it down into bite-sized pieces.
Exactly. And then make sure you're celebrating your wins, no matter how small they may seem. Did you get a positive response to a pitch? Did you make a connection with a potential buyer? Take a moment to acknowledge those victories and give yourself credit.
So it's about focusing on what you have accomplished rather than what you haven't done yet.
Exactly.
But let's be honest, sometimes this whole journey can feel really long and really tough. So what advice would you give to authors who are starting to feel burnt out?
Well, I think it's important to take a step back and reevaluate your goals. What are you hoping to achieve with your book? What are your priorities right now?
Taking some time to reflect and reconnect with your purpose.
Exactly. And if you're feeling burnt out, maybe it's time to make some adjustments. Can you delegate some tasks? Can you scale back your efforts a bit? Or maybe even take a break from the book altogether for a little while.
Putting your own well-being first.
Exactly. It's okay to change course along the way. Your goals and priorities may shift, and that's perfectly fine.
Being flexible and adaptable.
Right.
Now, I think we all experience self-doubt sometimes, especially in a field like publishing where it can be so competitive. So what advice would you give to authors who are struggling to stay positive amidst all the rejection and the pressure?
Well, first of all, I would say remember that you are not a failure. Success in publishing often takes time, it takes perseverance, it takes a lot of grit.
It's so easy to tie our self-worth to our book's performance.
It is. But it's important to try to separate those two things. And I would also say, focus on those small wins. Did you get a positive review? Did you connect with a potential buyer? Did you finish writing a new chapter? Celebrate those victories, no matter how small they may seem.
Finding those little glimmers of hope.
Exactly. And remember, even the most successful authors have faced rejection and setbacks along the way. It's all part of the process.
So it's about reframing those experiences as opportunities for growth.
Right. Every no brings you closer to a yes.
I love that.
And most importantly, remember that you're not alone in this. There are so many other authors out there who have faced similar challenges. So connect with them, share your experiences, offer support, and learn from each other.
Building a community.
Yes.
Now, I want to touch on something that the Mothalla Guide doesn't really address specifically, and that's the ethical side of bulk sales. What are your thoughts on that? Are there any ethical considerations that authors should keep in mind when they're approaching this market?
That's a really interesting question, and I think it's definitely something worth thinking about. The guide focuses on the practical strategies for bulk sales, but it's also important for authors to approach this market with a sense of integrity and transparency. Be upfront about your discounts, make sure that the book aligns with the organization's values and goals.
Transparency and authenticity.
Yes.
And have you ever come across any ethical dilemmas in your own experience with bulk sales? Let us know in the comments.
I think it's always important to find that balance between effectively promoting your work and staying true to your own values as an author.
Well said. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break. But be sure to join us for part 3 of this deep dive, where we'll be exploring even more strategies for making the most of bulk book sales. And we are back for the third and final part of our deep dive into bulk book sales. I'm feeling pretty energized right now. I don't know about you, but I'm seeing my book in a whole new light after all this.
Yeah, I think a lot of authors don't realize the potential that's out there when it comes to bulk sales. It's a whole different ballgame compared to just selling individual copies.
For sure. So let's dive into some of those more advanced strategies for really maximizing our success in this market.
One thing that's really important to remember is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to bulk sales. What works for one author might not work for another.
So it's all about finding what works best for me, for my book, for my audience.
Exactly. And that often involves a bit of experimentation. Try different approaches and see what resonates with your market.
So just like with any marketing strategy, it's all about testing and refining.
Right.
Speaking of marketing, I'm curious if we can leverage our existing marketing channels to boost our bulk sales efforts.
Absolutely. Remember, bulk sales shouldn't exist in a vacuum. You can use your existing marketing channels to generate leads and create buzz around your book.
So it's about integrating bulk sales into my overall marketing strategy.
Exactly. So, for example, if you have a strong social media presence, you can use that to your advantage. Create posts highlighting the benefits of bulk purchases, or showcase organizations that have already used your book successfully.
Oh, that's a great idea, using social proof.
Exactly.
What about other creative marketing strategies?
Don't forget about your website. Make sure you have a dedicated page on your website that outlines your bulk purchase options. Your pricing, testimonials, all of that. You want to make it as easy as possible for organizations to find the information they need and make a purchase.
So it's all about streamlining the process.
Right.
Now, the Mothalla Guide also mentions distributors. What role do they play in all of this?
Distributors can be really helpful. Think of them as an extension of your sales team. They specialize in bulk book sales, so they already have those connections with organizations, and they can handle all of the logistics of fulfillment for you.
So it's like having a whole team of experts working behind the scenes to help me sell more books. That sounds amazing. But what if I'm not quite ready to work with a distributor yet? Are there any other things I can do to boost my bulk sales efforts?
Absolutely. One strategy that can be really effective is offering incentives for bulk purchases.
So like sweetening the deal a little bit.
Right. Maybe you offer a free webinar or workshop that's based on your book's content. Or maybe you give them a discount on future purchases.
So it's about finding those win-win scenarios.
Exactly.
Now, something that I'm really excited about is the potential for collaboration. The guide talks about partnering with organizations on special projects. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Imagine partnering with a nonprofit organization to create a custom edition of your book that's specifically tailored to their mission, or working with a company to develop a training program that's based on the principles you've outlined in your book.
That's incredible. It's about taking your book's message and amplifying it through these collaborations. You're not just selling books anymore, you're creating something truly meaningful.
And those collaborations can often lead to all sorts of unexpected opportunities, speaking engagements, media appearances, even new writing projects.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like a ripple effect.
Right.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into bulk book sales. I don't know about you, but I feel like I've learned so much today.
Me too. It's been a really fascinating conversation.
It really has. And I hope that our listeners are feeling just as energized and inspired as I am. Who knows? Maybe someone out there is going to land a major bulk sale deal because of what they learned today.
Hmm.
But even if you're not quite ready to dive into bulk sales just yet, I think the principles we've talked about today are valuable for any author. Building relationships, providing value,